The folder arrived on her desk at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, and Mila already knew the day before she'd even opened it. She could tell by the weight. Contracts had a certain density when someone wanted something from you badly enough. She'd learned that working 4 years in the accounts receivable office of a company that no longer existed, chasing payments from people who had no intention of paying. Weight meant leverage. Weight meant someone had already decided how this ended. She set her coffee down. Cheap coffee, the kind that came from a machine in the hallway that charged $1.25 and always gave you 20% less than the cup you paid for. She'd run the math once, out of spite. Over the course of a year, the machine had stolen approximately $42 from her. She'd filed a formal complaint. HR had called it an interesting perspective. That was 6 months before the layoffs. The folder had her name on it. Mila Voss. Not Ms. Voss. Not Mila. Just the whole name, like she was being entered into evidence. She didn't open it. Not yet. The office around her was still empty. She came in early because the subway was cheaper before 7, and because the silence before other people arrived was the only part of the workday that felt like it belonged to her. She'd been doing this at Harrington and Slate for 8 months. Accounts payable. Reconciliation. Sitting in the Florence box, Lower Manhattan, making sure other people's numbers added up while her own life stubbornly refused to. She made $31,000 a year. Her mother had said, "At least it's steady." Her mother also believed that loyalty was its own reward, which explained a lot about her mother's situation, and none of it good. The folder. She opened it. There were 3 documents inside. The first was a letter on stationery so heavy it felt like a building material. At the top, embossed in charcoal gray, Callahan Group. Below that, a single paragraph informing her that Harrington and Slate had been acquired, effective immediately, and that her services were no longer required. 2 weeks severance. A non-disclosure agreement she was advised to sign before exiting the building. She read it twice. Then she put it down and read the second document, which was a checklist for returning her ID badge and clearing her desk. The third document was the NDA. So that was that. She sat with it for a moment. Outside, the city was already moving. The low rumble of trucks, the first thin light coming through the blinds, a taxi horn somewhere below. New York didn't wait for you to absorb things. It just kept going and expected you to keep up. Her first thought was about the machine in the hallway. Those $42 were gone now. She'd never get them back. Her second thought was about her landlord. Her third thought was about Dex. She didn't let herself have the third thought for very long. Devlin Marsh had been her fiancé for 14 months. She'd met him through a friend of a cousin at a birthday party she hadn't wanted to attend, and he had been charming in exactly the way that made her suspicious. Not loud about it, not performative, just quietly certain that she would like him. He'd been right. She'd spent 6 months convincing herself that was okay, that liking someone was enough, that the particular flatness she felt when she thought about her future was just anxiety and not some deeper, more accurate reading of her own life. He proposed in November. She said yes, because it was November and cold and she was tired. And he was there, and her mother had cried on the phone when she told her. The wedding was set for April. It was now February. She knew about his assistant before she found the texts. That was the part that still bothered her, the way she'd known without knowing. The slight shift in how he said her name on the phone, the way he started closing the laptop when she walked into a room, the expensive haircut he explained by saying the old place had raised its prices. She was an accountant. She noticed numbers, and she noticed discrepancies, and Dex had become a discrepancy in the ledger of their relationship about 3 months before she'd found the proof. His assistant's name was Bree. She was 24 and worked in his office and had, apparently, been consoling him through the stress of his engagement for the past 2 months. Mila found out on a Sunday morning when she borrowed his phone to order coffee because her own was charging and his was sitting right there, unlocked, already open to a text that began "last night was" and did not end in any way that she could have anticipated when she woke up that morning, thinking about whether they needed more dish soap. She left before he came out of the shower. She didn't take anything. She thought about this later, the strange dignity of it. She just walked out, still in yesterday's clothes, down the 4 flights of stairs and out onto the street in the cold, and she stood there on the sidewalk and thought, I knew. She'd known, and she'd stayed anyway, and she'd let herself be made into someone who stayed. That was the part that made her chest feel hollow in a way that had nothing to do with Dex specifically. That had been 8 days ago. Now she'd lost her job. She signed the NDA. Not because she agreed with it. She didn't, on principle. But because she had a security deposit that wasn't coming back, and she needed the 2 weeks, and she was practical before she was proud. She'd learned that young. Pride didn't cash. She turned in her badge at 8:15, before most of the office arrived, and stepped out into the February air with her personal items in a banker's box that she hadn't had personal items enough to fill. She walked for a while because she didn't know where else to go. Her apartment felt wrong right now, too small, too full of Dex's absence, his toothbrush she'd thrown away, but the bare spot on the shelf still visible. Her mother would ask questions she didn't have the energy to answer. Her friends would ask similar questions, but with better intentions and worse timing. She ended up in a bar. It was barely noon. The bar was the kind of place that had been there since the 70s and hadn't changed anything about itself in apology for that. Wood paneling, no TVs, dim lighting, a bartender who looked like he'd seen exactly this before and didn't require an explanation. She ordered a whiskey. She didn't particularly like whiskey, but coffee felt wrong for the occasion, and she'd already had 1 terrible cup today, and enough was enough. The place was almost empty. A man at the far end of the bar reading something on his phone, 2 older guys near the window who were clearly regulars, the comfortable, wordless kind, and her. She drank her whiskey and opened the calculator on her phone. Severance, 2 weeks. Rent due in 18 days. Savings. Enough for 6 weeks if she was careful, 4 if anything unexpected happened. She made a note to cancel the wedding venue deposit, which was non-refundable. She already knew this. She had read the contract 4 times because she always read contracts, and then sat for a moment considering the weight of that. $450 she'd never see again, a party in April that was also never happening, a man who was probably explaining her absence to his assistant, with the particular exhausted regret of someone who'd been caught rather than someone who was sorry. She ordered a second whiskey. That's an aggressive calculator session. She looked up. The man who'd been at the far end of the bar had moved. Not aggressively. He was just there now, 1 stool between them, a glass of something amber in front of him that he clearly hadn't ordered recently because the ice had mostly melted. He was looking at her phone. He was older. Not old, somewhere in his early 40s, maybe, the kind of age that sits differently depending on the life you've led. His looked like it had been led hard and deliberately. Dark suit, no tie, the collar open 1 button, and a scar along his jaw that he hadn't tried to hide and hadn't needed to because the rest of him made people look at the whole rather than the parts. His eyes were light gray, the color of Lake Michigan in November. It's a stressful spreadsheet, she said. You're calculating runway. She looked at him, the ratio of fixed expenses to available liquid, he said. I recognize it. You start with rent. Most people start with rent. Most people don't do it in bars at noon. Most people haven't had my morning. He nodded, like this was a complete answer. He looked back at his own drink. He didn't push. She appreciated that, the not pushing. Dex had always pushed, conversations like negotiations, like he needed to arrive somewhere she wasn't expecting. Layoff, she said, because the whiskey was doing something to her filter, and before that, an engagement that turned out to be running on fraud the whole time, fraud. He was cooking the books, except the books were our relationship. She looked at her phone. I'm very good with actual books, for what it's worth. What kind? Accounts receivable, payable. Reconciliation. She set the phone down. I can tell you to the dollar what something is worth and what's missing and why the numbers don't add up. Turns out I'm less good at applying that to people. He was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone who'd stopped listening, but the silence of someone who was thinking about what they'd heard. Connolly, he said. She blinked. What? My name, Connolly. He didn't offer a first name. Mila, she said. Mila. He said it like he was filing it. What would you say your accuracy rate is, with numbers? Percent. Roughly. I've never posted an error I didn't catch myself first, she paused. In 4 years, he picked up his glass. That's a remarkable answer. I know. Something shifted in his expression, not warmth exactly, more like recalibration. Like she'd said something that didn't fit the category he'd put her in, and he was adjusting. She didn't know then what Connolly was. She knew he was in finance. That was the word he used when she asked, and he used it with the practiced ease of someone who'd answered that question correctly for a long time. She knew he ordered whiskey that cost more than her hour of work. She knew he occupied space the way certain men did, like the air around them had already received instructions. She didn't know that 2 days later, when she was sitting in her apartment with 4 job applications open, and none of them returning anything resembling hope, that his card would still be in her coat pocket. She'd assumed she threw it away. She hadn't. She called the number on the card because her landlord had called twice, and the job market had responded to her applications with the same energy the coffee machine responded to her $25. A woman answered. Professional, efficient, slightly alarmed at Mila calling directly, which suggested the card wasn't supposed to be given out this casually. Mila explained that she'd met Mr. Connolly at a bar 2 days ago, and he had mentioned vaguely but definitely, that he had a financial operations position that needed filling. There was a pause. He said that, he implied it. Another pause. Hold, please. She was on hold for 6 minutes, which she timed. Then Connolly's voice with no preamble. Tuesday, 11 o'clock. 48 West 52nd. What should I bring? Yourself. A beat. Your accuracy rate. The building was not what she expected, which was foolish, because she should have calibrated her expectations by the quality of his suit and the price of his whiskey. It was a tower with no signage she could find anywhere in the lobby, and a reception desk staffed by a woman who looked at Mila's coat with the polite neutrality of someone professionally trained. Not to react to things they considered obvious. Miss Voss, the woman said, not as a question. Yes, 41st floor. He's expecting you. The office on the 41st floor was large and spare and extremely organized, which she noticed immediately and filed away. Organized spaces belonged to people who believed order was possible and worth maintaining. Chaos was easy. Order took decision. Connolly was standing at the window when she came in. He looked the same as he had in the bar. The suit, the open collar, the grey eyes. Except here he was clearly in his own territory, and it looked like it fit him the way the scar fit his jaw. You called, he said. You gave me a card. I give a lot of people cards. You don't actually, she said. That woman who answered sounded like I'd called his private cell instead of a business line. Something in his expression again, that same recalibration. Sit down, Mila. She sat. He stayed at the window for another moment, then turned. What do you know about the Callahan Group? She considered this. They acquire struggling mid-market firms and dissolve the staff while retaining the infrastructure and client lists. They did it to my employer 8 months ago, and to me personally yesterday. What do you? They're precise of them. Fiscally, they're precise. They identify undervalued receivables and restructure them. It's elegant if you don't have feelings about the people involved. She paused. I have some feelings about the people involved. I'm buying them, Connolly said. She stared at him. The Callahan Group, he said. I'm in the process of acquiring them. It's complicated for legal reasons I won't detail. I need someone who can reconcile their books before the acquisition closes, someone who can identify where they've buried their liabilities and how. You need a forensic accountant. I need you. I'm not certified in forensic. You can find the discrepancies, he said. It wasn't a question. She looked at him for a long moment. What kind of operation do you run exactly? Financial, he said, and it had the same practiced ease as before. Except this time she heard the edges of it, what was inside the word and what it was also covering. She'd grown up in Bridgeport. She knew what controlled scarcity looked like. She knew what it meant when a business didn't have signage, and the woman at the front desk had that particular quality of attention. She knew that the organized office and the measured silence, and the way he said, "I'm acquiring the Callahan Group," the same way someone else would say, "I'm ordering dinner," pointed towards something much larger than an investment portfolio. She should have stood up. She sat there doing mental arithmetic instead. "What's the compensation?" she asked. He told her. The number he said was so far outside her previous experience that she processed it the way you'll process unexpected pain. First a delay, then the full impact. "Per year," she said. "Per month," he said, "plus expenses. Plus a performance incentive when the acquisition closes." She did not let her face move. She was very good at not letting her face move when numbers did things to her. "And what exactly do you need me to do? Find what they're hiding," he said. "Tell me what it's worth. Tell me what it costs." She looked at him. "What if I find something that changes the value of what you're buying? That's the point. What if I find something that makes you not want to buy it?" He looked at her steadily. "I'll cross that bridge." She was quiet for a moment. The city was 41 floors below, doing what it did, not waiting. "I want full access," she said. "Every ledger, every account, every subsidiary account. If there's a dollar moving, I need to see where it came from and where it's going. Done. I won't touch anything outside the financials. I don't want to know what I don't need to know, understood? And if I find something that's illegal?" "If you find something illegal in the financials of the Callahan Group," he said, "you will find it has already been documented and is being handled through the appropriate channels." She wanted to ask what appropriate channels meant to someone who ran an operation out of a signless tower and gave out business cards to women in bars at noon, but she thought she could probably reconstruct the answer from available data. "All right," she said. She did not ask herself why she was saying all right. She told herself it was the money. That was partly true. The other part was something she identified much later, that Connolly had looked at her calculator and her runway math and her non-refundable deposit and her 4 years with no errors and said, "I see what you are," and no one had said that to her in a very long time. The work was real. She'd expected it to be complicated, and it was. The Callahan Group's books were a masterwork of strategic obscurity. Not illegal, exactly, or not obviously, which was itself a kind of skill. They'd parked liabilities in subsidiary structures that were technically disclosed but practically invisible. The way you could hide something in plain sight by surrounding it with enough other things. She found the first one in 3 days. The second 2 days after that. She worked in a small office 2 floors below Connolly's, which he'd apparently cleared out and equipped specifically for her, with a second monitor and a standing desk option, and an actual good coffee machine that she had complicated feelings about. She didn't see him often. He moved through the building the way weather moved. You became aware of it at the edges, a shift in the temperature of the room, the particular way his assistant walked faster, the way conversations in the hallway got quieter. When she did see him, it was usually because he'd come to her. "What did you find?" "Sit down and I'll show you," she said the second time he did this, because she'd learned he liked precision, and she couldn't deliver precision to someone standing at her shoulder. He sat. She walked him through it, the subsidiary in Delaware, the receivables parked there, the way the structure made the company's liability profile look significantly healthier than it was. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, she waited. "How much?" he said. 12.3 million that isn't showing where it should be. Could be more. I haven't finished. How long to finish? A week. Maybe 8 days. You've been here 6 days. I know, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Are you sleeping? The question landed strangely. Not invasive exactly, but unexpected, like a number appearing in a column where you'd assumed the cell was empty. Enough, she said. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have. He stood. He looked like he was going to say something else, and then he didn't, and he left. She thought about that more than she should have. The thing was, she'd told herself she knew what she was doing. She was performing a specific, bounded service for a man who operated in a world she was choosing not to look at directly. She'd drawn a line around her portion of it. The numbers, the ledgers, the columns that were supposed to add up and didn't, and she'd stayed inside that line. It was a very clean arrangement, and then the night someone came for her files. She was in the office late. Past 10, the building mostly empty, the kind of silence that made the fluorescent lights feel louder. She'd gone to get water and came to find the door to her office open, which she always kept closed, and a man inside who was not supposed to be there, standing at her desk with his hand on her laptop. She was in the doorway. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. She did not scream. She registered. The suit, which was wrong for someone stealing files, too careful, too deliberate. The fact that he'd touched the laptop rather than taking it. The way he looked at her with something that wasn't exactly surprise, more like recalculation. Then a second man appeared from behind her, and everything happened very fast. She caught a door frame on the way down. Her shoulder hit something hard. She was aware of shouting, and then of a different kind of silence, and then of Connolly's voice somewhere close, saying her name. Not Mila, not Miss Voss, just a word, compressed and sharp. Later she would remember it as two separate things, the falling and then him. She had a bruised shoulder and a cut on her palm from the doorframe, neither of which was serious. But he made her sit down in his office while he stood near the window, doing something on his phone with the focused efficiency of someone closing a very particular kind of account. The files, she said. The Callahan files. That's what they were after. Yes. The liability structure I found. Someone doesn't want that documented. Someone already knows about it. He didn't look up from his phone. Now we know who. We, she said, noting it. He looked up then. You've been in this since you called that number, he said. I'm not telling you otherwise. I know that. She looked at her hand, the cut small and already clotting. I'm not asking to get out. I'm asking what we means in terms of what happens next. He put the phone down. He came and sat across from her, in the chair on the other side of his own desk, which somehow made the whole thing feel different, like he'd stepped across something, some organizational boundary, some arrangement of space that had been very precisely maintained. It means I keep you safe, he said, and you finish the work. That's not symmetrical. No, he agreed. She looked at him. What do you want, Connolly? Actually want? From this? He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. The Callahan Group destroyed 12 businesses in 3 years, he said, finally, including one that belonged to people I'm responsible for. I'm buying it because that's how you stop something. Not by fighting it on its terms, but by owning it, changing the structure. He paused. And I need someone who can tell me precisely what it costs. You could have hired anyone. I hired you. Why? He looked at her with those gray eyes, and she thought again about Lake Michigan in November, cold and opaque and extremely deep. Because you sat in a bar at noon with a broken engagement and a layoff and a calculator, he said, and you didn't ask anyone to fix it. You were just figuring out the math. She sat with that. I need to finish the files, she said. Tomorrow, tonight. I know what I'm looking at now, and I'm faster when I have momentum. He said nothing for a moment. Then, I'll stay. You don't have to. I'll stay, he said, which wasn't an argument and wasn't an explanation. It was just the fact of it, stated the way he stated most things. She finished at 1 in the morning, $22.7 million in buried liabilities. She printed everything and stacked it in a folder and wrote the number on the front in her own handwriting, the way she'd been taught. Numbers should be visible, clear, not hiding. She brought it to him. He was reading something, or pretending to in the chair near the window. He looked at the folder. He looked at the number. Is it accurate? He said. Then, we're done. You're done, she said. I'm done with this part. She sat down across from him because the chair was right there, and her shoulder ached and she'd been sitting at a desk for 6 hours, and this chair was better. What happens now? The acquisition closes in 9 days. The restructure begins. He set the folder down. I'd like to offer you a permanent position. She looked at him. Financial operations, he said. Full oversight of the Callahan assets once the transition is complete. It's not a small job. I know what it is, she said. I've been looking at the books for 2 weeks. Then you know it pays. I know what it pays. She was quiet for a moment. Why does it have to be a job? He looked at her. You offered me money to do something, she said. I did it. If you want to keep working together, that's a different conversation. That's a partnership. She met his eyes. I don't want to be in your ledger as a line item, Connolly. I've been a line item before. I know what happens to them. Something moved through his expression, slow and deliberate, like a ship changing course. What do you want? He said. I want to know that what I find and what I say matters to how you decide, not just to how you calculate. It already does. I want to know that before I sign anything else. He was quiet. Outside, the city was still moving. It always was. That was the thing about New York. It didn't stop for your important moments. It just went on and let you have them in the middle of it. It matters, he said, and he said it without the particular careful smoothness of someone performing honesty. He said it like a man who'd spent a long time keeping his own books and was reading a number he hadn't expected. She believed him, not because she was sure she'd been wrong about people before and she knew it, but because she'd learned to tell the difference between a fabricated number and a real one. A fabricated number always balanced too perfectly. A real one had edges, irregularities, the evidence of something actual happening behind it. He had edges. He'd never pretended otherwise. All right, she said, for the second time, except this time it didn't feel like a calculation. It felt like something she was choosing with full information. She did not take the permanent position. Instead, she negotiated a consulting arrangement with equity participation tied to the performance of the restructured portfolio, which was more complicated and more honest and gave her something that a salary never had: the right to leave if the numbers stopped making sense. She told this to her mother on the phone, who asked if she was seeing someone, because mothers were calibrated for different information than accountants. It's complicated, Mila said. Is he good to you? She thought about the office chair he'd had brought in before she arrived, the coffee machine, the way he said her name when she was on the floor, the fact that he'd stayed until 1 a.m. reading in a chair because she needed to finish her work and he'd decided that meant he stayed. He's honest, she said, in the ways that matter. Her mother said that was either very romantic or very concerning, and Mila said probably both, and they moved on. The acquisition closed on a Thursday. She was there when the papers were signed, not as an employee, as a partner. The word was in the consulting agreement, lowercase and specific. She'd put it there herself. Connolly signed his name last, the way he did everything, without ceremony, without announcement, with the complete attention of someone who understood that what you put your name on became yours. He looked up afterward and found her immediately in the room, grey eyes. That recalibration she'd come to recognize. Accurate? He said. She looked at the room, the lawyers, the documents, the 22.7 million in buried liabilities now visible and accounted for, the structure of something that had hidden its costs for 3 years now open on paper for anyone to read. Accurate, she said. It wasn't a love story, or it wasn't only that. It was the story of a woman who could read numbers standing in a room that had finally added up, with a man who'd wanted the truth of the ledger badly enough to hire someone who'd give it to him straight. What happened after that was its own kind of math, slow and imperfect, and nothing like she'd planned, and exactly right. She still started early. The coffee was better now. The subway fare was the same, but she'd stopped keeping track of what the machine owed her. Some debts you eventually decide to forgive.